great. As you guys are hopping onto the call, I'm just going to go ahead and get started here. We have a lot to get through in this hour, and I want to definitely give us ample time to get through it. My name is Sandra, and welcome to R.E.D Talks. If you are not familiar with R.E.D Talks, it stands for Raters Engaged in Diversity. It was started by the Diversity Committee through Texas Tech University Staff Senate. And every month we bring through a panel of staff members or community members who are experts in their fields, and they get to talk to us about different topics related to diversity. This month is March, and March is Women's History Month, and we are over the moon excited about our panelists we have today. I'll let them go ahead and introduce themselves, and then I'll introduce my co-host Crystal for the day, and we'll go and get started. So Dee, if you'd like to kick us off and introduce yourself.
Sounds great. Thanks, Sandra. Hi, y'all. My name is Nguyen, if we hadn't met before. I'm an assistant manager in hospitality services, and then I also serve as the Staff Senate president.
Great, thank you, Dee. Dr. Simone, I have you next on my list if you want to go ahead and knock it out.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Simone. I'm the Title IX coordinator. I use she, her pronouns. I've been at Tech for a really long time. I came as a student, now I'm here in administration, and so I'm really excited to be able to talk with everyone today.
She's wonderful. Hopefully you guys get the opportunity to meet with her sometime on campus over the course of your time here. Mari, I have you coming up next. You'll introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Mari Baeza. I know it says Maryellen on my screen, but Mari is fine, Maryellen is fine. I am an assistant director at the Texas Tech Graduate School, and I am super excited to be here today on a panel with some pretty incredible women. So I'm super excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Super excited. I have a lot to say about Mari. She's my old supervisor, and she's a phenomenal woman. And then Dr. Schwintz, if you'll finish us off for introductions.
Great, thank you. My name is Sarah Schwintz, and I'm the Senior Director for Academic and Student Affairs and University Programs, which is in the Office of the Provost. I've been here at Texas Tech a really long time too, Kimberly, about 18 years. And I'm also a part-time instructor for our Integrative Studies program in University Studies, and also the Human Resource Development minor part-time. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks.
And we're excited to have you guys, and all of you guys completely. I didn't introduce myself. I realized that before. Like I said before, my name is Sandra Addo. I work for the College of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources, or CASNR for short. I'm the administrator for diversity and graduate student recruitment. And so those are the two things I kind of knock out within the college. Normally you'll see Jake here. He's posted our last few talks for R.E.D Talks for the last couple months. But me and my co-host Crystal, who you'll meet here in a moment, decided to step up and take over for Women's History Month. And so Crystal, if you'll go ahead and introduce yourself, we'll go and get started.
Hello, I am extremely excited. I am thankful that Taylor, our diversity committee chair, suggested an all-women Power for Women HERStory month. So thank you, Taylor, for encouraging having an all-women panel. But we look forward to having Jake back next month. So I'm a program manager in the Office of Research Development and Communications. I primarily work with faculty in hopes and efforts to get their research funded. I have enjoyed Staff Senate so much, especially with Dee as our current fearless leader. She has been amazing. So I look forward to hearing more about her story and meeting the rest of the panelists. I do know Mari. I often send her mistaken emails, but you haven't gotten one from me in a while, Mari.
Very true, but it's always good to hear from you.
See, we actually found out when we were getting ready for this that all the panelists and the hosts knew each other. And so we're super excited. I hope it's going to be a really great discussion. But if you guys are ready, I am. We can go and hop in. Perfect. So ladies, it is Women's HERStory Month, and we are celebrating the history and the accomplishments of great women all over. Can you guys go ahead and tell me a story about an impactful woman to you? I will actually go first. So someone who is close to me, who I know is dear on this panel, and I know I just told her this past week about how wonderful she was to me, is Maryellen or Mari Baeza. I mentioned before, she was my first supervisor when I transitioned from being a student to a young professional. And we went through the highest of highs and the lowest of lows together as I transitioned And beyond the mentoring relationship that we had, which was phenomenal, I think my favorite thing about having her as a leader and someone to look up to is that no matter what she said, even if I was not doing the best job at X, Y, and Z, she came to me with grace. She came to me with understanding. She knew exactly how to speak to someone in a way that someone would be spoken to, in a way that they would, carry on and learn from that lesson and not be talked down to. And I've always inspired that about her. So everything I know about leadership, I can pretty much attribute to Mani. And so, not to call you out or anything, Mani, but if you wanted to hop in and let us know next who's inspirational, impactful in your life.
Oh, wow. Well, after that, I mean, gosh, now you put me on the spot a little bit, but without getting too emotional after those beautiful words, thank you so much, Sandra. That means a lot to me. Being a new supervisor, being in a management role, you always feel a little insecure about your abilities. So to hear that from someone that I used to supervise is truly touching. So thank you so much. So for me, as far as an impactful woman, when I graduated from tech and began working in higher education, I longed for a mentor. I've been searching for someone like me, someone who was first generation college graduate that could guide me in my professional career. Unfortunately, I have yet to find one. So as the saying goes, if you can't find one, be one. But I will say that the spirit of go for it, do it for yourself, definitely comes from my mother. She did not have the opportunities that I have had. She came to this country as a teenager. She struggled to learn English up until she was in her mid to late 30s. She married young, she started a family young, and she dedicated herself to our home. But she's always been in my corner. And so she's definitely my biggest cheerleader, my greatest supporter. And at the end of the day, I think that's all we really need, is just someone to believe in you and your abilities and to teach you to never give up and pursue the things that you want in life. So I think that my mother would definitely be the most impactful woman in my life.
So I'm with you, Mari. First generation students, we gotta stick together. And as I think through this question, it's really hard for me to identify one, so I'm gonna identify a couple here, but also kind of weave in a little bit of my story so y'all can get to know me a little bit more if you haven't heard already. So first and foremost, it starts with my aunt Tran. She was like a second mother to me, and she helped raise me into a lot of the person that I've become today. When I first came to Texas Tech, my next mentor would be Gloria Torres. And Gloria is still here. She's the manager of Sam's Place at the Sub, 1923 in Pachuco. I started as a student assistant with hospitality services with Gloria. And she was with me through my journey as an undergrad. I lost my mother in 2011. I had to take essentially a 4-year break from my undergraduate degree, cost of finances, personal things going on. But Gloria helped me keep things in perspective. She reinforced the work ethic that I had, but also reminded me to be mindful of these goals. Like, yes, you had to take a break from your undergraduate degree, and yes, you're working really hard to, earn the money to go back, but always keep that in perspective. Don't forget the reason why you're here is to ultimately earn a degree and to further your career path. So I really attribute much of my young adolescence to Gloria, and essentially this idea of motherhood, just finding somebody else or mentorship that can instill these values and kind of remind me of why I'm here and what I'm doing. Now in my professional career, I finally graduated with my degree in August of 2020. I've got my bachelor's of science in chemistry. And then I've been promoted in my position here with hospitality services. So much of that I can attribute to my education. But the last person I want to call out is Christy Norfleet. Many of y'all may know her. She's very active on campus. She was in Gender Equity Council. She helps out with Women's Staff Network. She served on Staff Senate. So Christy is really the person in my department that really encouraged me to become a better professional, to see that there are other opportunities outside of food service. Sometimes, we all get into our little holes of this is where we are, but again, we're all part of Texas Tech University. So there's always bigger things and more things that we can be connected to and connected with. So I really appreciate her from, just listening to me rant and just being my sounding board, bouncing ideas off of, to also just helping me grow as I try to navigate the professional world of higher education.
I think I was waiting for you, Kimberly, to go, but I'll jump in. So I'll tell my story of my, one of my favorite stories of the lineage of the females in my family. And so my favorite story comes from Norway. So in 1880, my great-great-grandmother, Sarah, came on a boat from Norway when she was 18 years old by herself. She later sent back for her sisters to come join her, and she settled in Iowa. All my family's from Iowa. She married, of course, a short 3 months later. She worked as a midwife her entire life and birthed 9 children of her own. So I think the women in my family are strong, they're courageous, they're fearless. My grandmother, so would be her granddaughter, her name is Ollie Sarah Fry. So there's a name there going on there that I like to hear about. And my grandmother was also a teacher in 3rd grade for many years. And I appreciate her I guess, speech and help around education and how important it is, and education's an opportunity. So she instilled that in our family.
Yeah, so Sarah and I were playing like mute button Zoom chicken, I think. But I also am a first generation student. Mine is also very personal. My grandmother, my mom's mom, she had 5 children in the 50s and worked full time, which was just really not heard of. My family's from Virginia, a lot of old South kind of familial ideas, but my grandma was a full-time working person. She also integrated their church preschool and daycare in the 50s in Virginia. And while that should not have had to happen in the 50s in Virginia, that's something that really, I think, kind of set who we are as a family and what we value. This idea about everybody that we encounter is worthy of dignity and respect, and we are a broader family. And my favorite story, though, about my grandma, she actually got married scandalously young. She had to leave the state and sneak across state lines to marry my grandfather. And then she would never tell us how old she was because she didn't want us to do the math on quite how young she got married. So there's that. But she dropped out of school because of getting married so young and having a family. And she was helping to raise my cousins, her grandchildren. And, she's giving them kind of the speech about you have to finish school, you have to finish strong, you have to go to college, these things are important. And of course, because they were teenagers, right, they said to my grandma, well, you didn't finish high school, right? Like, you can't make me finish because you didn't. And so at that point in my grandma's life, when she was in her 50s and she had grandchildren already, she went back and got her GED just so she could say, no, this is really important. You have to go and get your education. And so I lost my grandma in my late 20s, but the very last thing we were able to do together is she was able to come and see me graduate with my PhD. And that was such I'm totally gonna cry. It was such an emotional experience to see kind of this really like kick-assing, trailblazing Southern belle from Virginia that really just kind of set this expectation for what our family was going to do. And so while I was the first grandkid that went to college, after I went and graduated, all of my younger cousins have also gone to school. And I really think it's because of my grandma.
That is such a sweet story. And actually all of them were. I have to jump in because I also was a first generation student and also just first generation American. And so my mother coming over here from Ghana to settle down with my dad, that woman has worked every single day of her life through sickness, through health, through everything. She raised 4 kids while working full time and getting her master's degree because she said that I wouldn't be allowed to beat her to do it. So she barely beat me, but she did. And she has made such an impact on my life. Everything that I do, I can attribute to knowing that she would want this for me. And I love her for that. So thank you guys for sharing that story. with all of us today.
So I'll wrap up before we go on to our next question. And so I'm also a first gen. I was also a young mom. We often, my sisters and I, talk about how progressive our mom was. So although she got a few college hours, she had 5 kiddos at home. And so she really, instilled in us not only the importance of education, but also being a mom, and that you could be both. And so she was a homemaker. So of course, in our Mexican household, she cooked from scratch, served my dad, those sorts of things. But she also worked full time and was the breadwinner of our family, which was not common. And so she, even in my 30s and my 40s, I come across a situation. I'm like, how did my mom know to prepare me for this? So, I would say with her, she just, not only did she just promote and encourage education, which then I passed on to my kiddo, but also just people in general. I just, the way that she saw people is the way that we see people, and it's just people are people. That's just how we were raised, and that everyone has a story to tell. And I know there's a quote somewhere about treating the janitor the same as the CEO, and that's really who she was. She would give the same respect to a homeless man named Bobby that was, walked the streets of where her office was, because before she passed away, she worked at the Innocence Project of Texas. And so, her students and also her colleagues just didn't understand why she let this homeless person in. And she always had a snack for him and a piece of fruit. But then we had these high profile lawyers that came in, and she gave them the same respect. And so I really look at life that way. I think that everyone has, again, a story to tell, and hopefully given the right opportunity and place and time, they feel comfortable enough to share it with you, and you learn it and take something from it, and continue to share your story. So our next question for the panelists is: the term feminism or feminist has been a very polarizing subject in our society today. In your words, how do you define feminism, and why do you think it's become so controversial?
Okay, since I went last time, I'll take the bait first. I think about feminism actually from my dad, which is kind of an interesting perspective. But my dad would have never described himself as a feminist, right? Like, I was a child of the 80s. My dad grew up on a farm in North Carolina. But for me, it was very clear that his expectations for me were exactly the same as they were for my brother, right? There was never any question that I would do one thing and my brother would do this other thing. When it came to chores, how we helped out around the house, what we were going to study, what we were going to be when we grew up. Really, the only gendered thing I remember from my dad actually is that he told me I was going to be the first female president of the United States. And I felt kind of sad thinking that we wouldn't have one before that, but there we are. But I think about feminism the same way now, that if we took away the word and we just talked about the concept that each of our kiddos should have the same opportunities as they grow up to be who they are and explore the things that are important to them and pursue their passions, without the charged language and the connotations, I think most people would identify that way, right? Like, still to this day, if you ask my dad, is he a feminist? He would absolutely say no. But then if you follow it up with, well, do you believe that your daughter has the same worth, value, should have the same opportunities as your son? He would say, of course, absolutely. And so I think part of our goal as a community really should just be helping people to see past the label and what we get stuck on there. And really this idea that just, we should approach it as everyone having equal value, equal worth, equal opportunity.
I do. I think there's a lack of understanding of what feminism means. And it's exactly that. That's how I define it. It's equality between genders. And I agree. So you take my husband, for example. We feel equal in the importance of our careers. We feel equal in the division of our household labor. We are equal in our childcare duties. We have equal value of, our perspectives and opinions of one another. And so I was raised with that model too. I think in the spirit of Women's History Month, if we look at the history of feminism, there's been like 3 different waves, right? So that first wave was, the political equality or women's right to vote in 1920, which really wasn't that long ago. And then the second wave of this feminism for that sort of legal and professional identity in the 60s and 70s. Now what we're seeing is feminism sort of for social equality. I think feminism is controversial too. I know that was a part of the question, because of really all the things that are in the news, right? Our exposure to gender discrimination, sexual harassment, sexual assault, we see it everywhere. So that may be why it's controversial.
You bring up a great point, and it is still controversial and it is still relevant. I'll give an example. 2 years ago, Super Bowl, the commercials, everybody loves to watch them. I explicitly remember the Microsoft commercial. It represented Katie Sowers because she was the first assistant coach for the NFL. And we were sitting through watching the commercials, and my uncle was with us and he was watching this, and it not just featured Katie Sowers, but other women, like celebrating women first, like the first woman to do XYZ. I can't remember all of it, but he was like, he made a comment, why is this important? Why are they recognizing all these women on this commercial? And I turned to him and I said, do you realize the NFL was like founded like 90 years ago? That this is the first woman like to ever be a coach in an NFL sport, in men's sports or football. And that all of these other women that have never had these opportunities that they're finally taking advantage of, we should show light on that. We should, because then people like me and our younger generations and other women and kids can realize that, hey, I see Vice President Kamala Harris. If she can be a vice president, I can become the president one day. It's important to recognize where we've come from. So thank you, Sarah, for that timeline. Where have we come from? Where are we now? And where can we go? We can shoot for the stars, because almost anything is possible now. So I think every day too, it's changing people's perspectives and kind of like you said, Kimberly, putting it in a different light, maybe not using the word feminist, but again, challenging them in different ways to make them think a little bit more critically about how this is important to women in the community. And also, it really shows how we are kicking that ceiling down, kicking that glass and raising that ceiling even higher for everybody here and everybody to come.
Yeah, I think that, feminism often gets its negative connotation because it definitely forces society to face the fact that women are not treated as equals, right? And so when you hold that mirror up to someone and show them that perhaps your ideas, your beliefs are the reason that some people are not offered the same opportunities, people take it personal, right? And so that's why you get that negative connotation of, oh, she's a feminist, or oh, he's a feminist, or the feminist, the feminist movement isn't a positive movement, because people take it personally. But I think that in those cases, when that happens, it's important to self-reflect, right? Educate themselves and try to make a difference so things can change. And so that's kind of how I feel about the whole feminism thing.
Thanks y'all for sharing. And I think feminism and basically everything in life, there's always people who have, or will go about it in a way that's a little bit radical. And so, and no matter what your belief is, radical people will exist on both sides. And a lot of times it makes people turned off to an idea without wanting to actually hear really the foundation of what makes it a good idea or maybe a bad idea. And I think, especially with feminism, it's so funny to kind of share a funny moment. So I work out in a CrossFit gym, I coach there, I spend all of my free time there. And one of the things you'll notice if you ever go to a CrossFit gym is if you look at a workout, there is always a woman's weight listed and a men's weight listed. And the women's weight, let's say it's 65 pounds on the barbell and the guy's weight is 95 pounds. My athletes will always give me a hard time for using that lighter weight because like, Sandra, aren't you a feminist? Don't you want equality? Why don't you pick up that 95-pound barbell and put it over your head? And then, I give them a hard time back. I'm like, okay, fine, let's switch for the day and see how well you do on X, Y, and Z things that, you know, might be a little bit easier for a female to do rather than a male. And so they give me a hard time, but it is really funny because I'll also go to maybe a non-CrossFit gym, it's a traditional, you know, Planet Fitness or anything like that. And I'll find that I'll go to a squat rack, I'll be loading up and getting ready to go. And a male might come up behind me and ask me to move away from that rack because he wants to use it. And they'll make jokes or they'll say things about how it's a male dominated space and they're tired of women being in their area. And I've always found that so wild because at the end of the day, we all should be focusing on being fit and healthy and getting in charge of our space and our fitness and our health. And that's not exclusive to a gender. It's not exclusive to males versus females. And so constantly working through that, that's probably my most personal story situation that I go through oftentimes with that. But I'm really thankful you guys all shared. Those were great. But anyway, moving on to questions. You all have worked in a variety of different jobs throughout your career. So do you remember a specific incident and then that where you made to feel inferior or maybe even superior solely because you are a woman in that specific space?
So in the work that I do as an assistant manager, part of it is to do student hiring. So I hire a lot of F1 or J1 students or international population. And I attribute a lot of this to, I think it's just cultural differences. So my real name is Deanna, but everybody knows me as D, and I go by D, but my family would call me Deanna, D, so whatever it is that you want to call me. But D is very unisex. If you just get to know me by email, you would not know my gender unless I have specified it to you. And so what I find interesting is that people make assumptions with emails and maybe read me as masculine or as male in some senses. And I find that I get across the point across less backlash when people think that I am male versus female. And so what's interesting sometimes is as these students come over, they're finally here in Lubbock, they come to Texas Tech and they come and meet me in my office and we have our in-person meetings. I get these funny looks of, oh, you're not a male, you're a female. And you know, I give them advice on talking them through the hiring process and this is what we need to do and things like that. And sometimes I get questioned, like maybe what I'm saying and the work that I do and the experience that I have doesn't count for anything because I am a woman. And maybe if they heard it from a male authority, they would take it a little bit better. But through time, through working in this position, again, you take it with a grain of salt, and I use it as learning opportunities to work with these students that, you know, hey, as you navigate the university, you're going to have all kinds of people, you know, trying to help you out and assist you through this process and different things like that. So changing students' perceptions, I find interesting, but yes, definitely with authority from time to time.
I agree with Dee. Working on the graduate side of things, I also work with a lot of people from a variety of different backgrounds. And, you know, occasionally I have had issues of, you know, my title is assistant director, but I do oversee the graduate center that I oversee. And so sometimes they will specifically ask me, well, you're just the assistant director. I need to talk to the director. And I'm like, well, that's technically me. It's just my title isn't director, but I'm the person that you need to talk to. And, you know, in some cases, some people have walked away because they don't want to talk to me, or they would rather talk to my male graduate assistant about the issue that they're having instead of me. So like Dee said, you know, you have to take it with a grain of salt. You know, you just have to maintain your professionalism and not let yourself feel inferior because, you know, again, there are cultural differences and you have to accept that. And I think part of being a professional is knowing that and having that awareness and not letting it bother you and not letting it offend you because, again, you can't help that. So that's kind of my experience with those situations.
I think a really interesting one. So in my previous job, I used to do sexual health education. So safe sex kind of talks, things like that. And I think being a female and a mom actually gave me a really different access point to that space. So I could go in and talk to student populations, even athletic teams or fraternity men, and be seen in a very different way, right? Like I could really present it from more of a public health and safety kind of conversation versus when I would see some of our male staff do it. So people got a little uncomfortable, like they almost felt like it was dirty if the information was coming from a male staff member, or they would make some kind of assumptions about why someone would want a career like that. And so it's just really interesting. That was a space that being female, it's not very threatening. You could come in and kind of just talk about like, okay, I want you to stay safe. This is how you can take care of yourself and your body. And that was really something I hadn't anticipated.
Let's see, I have many stories I could share about this, but I'm just going to pick one. So back in 2005, I was on maternity leave with my first child, and I just finished, this is 2005, right? So this is a few years ago. I just finished pumping, of course, on the floor of my supervisor's office at the time. There was no mother-friendly rooms then. And I was at a table with several other colleagues eating lunch, and I was asked how much milk I expressed that day. And I said, I usually about 60 ounces a day. And my male supervisor at the time thought that was hilarious and just teased the chef that we worked with. We don't need to make a milk order this week. Sarah pumps enough for all of us, and laughed, thought it was a joke, right? So I have a lot of these examples of, there were harassment, right? Kimberly's like going, yes. Instances that I can talk about being a female in the workplace. And I think probably most recently, it is exactly that. I'm gonna have to go back with what Mari says about being the woman who's in charge, right? I have students who are disgruntled and upset, and I have a white male supervisor, and they want to know who's next, right? Who's the VP? Who do I talk to next? Of course, I have a wonderful VP who will not talk to them unless they've talked to me and talked through the process and what the problem is, and had they been, you know, listened to and respected and heard, and does Sarah have a solution? Excuse me, Dr. Schwintz, right? So yeah, my examples are much more inferior than superior for being a woman.
Can I just add to Sarah's really quick? I think there were some things about the way my position was structured to get it exactly what Sarah and Mari are talking about. So there's a reason that my position reports through the president's office, so that when Kim is speaking on behalf of Title IX, she's also speaking on behalf of the office of the president. That helps with some of those. Some people still want to talk to my boss. But my favorite part of that when they want to talk to my boss is Grace Hernandez. So she's also an incredibly strong, wonderful woman. And so I think, yeah, sure, you can talk to my boss, and she'd love to hear from you. But I will say my experiences haven't always been positive, but I do really appreciate working within the president's office. That I do feel like, I mean, I report to the chief of staff, who's a woman of color, and then to the president. And one thing that I really appreciate about the president, and Sarah just kind of mentioned this as well, when he's talking about me to someone else, he always calls me Dr. Simone, which again, that sounds kind of silly, right? Like we shouldn't have to use those kind of signifiers, but I appreciate when our strong male allies do these things that say, no, you're talking to the person in charge, you're talking to the person that can help you. And it's those really small things that we can do to help lend authority and credence to our female colleagues' voices.
Those were excellent. Thank you for sharing. I'll wrap up and say that it has been really refreshing, and I've shared this with Sandra in our diversity committee, but it's been very refreshing working for, and I'll just mimic the same. I don't know how I got this lucky, but my supervisor, who's also a mentor, and she doesn't know it, or maybe she does know it, but she's a white woman. And in my career before that, not only was I a woman, but am a woman, but I am also a Mexicana. And so the career that I worked in, I loved. I probably worked the job of 3 people, but there were, instances where it finally caused me to leave that, that because my supervisors were white males and one white female that were put me in positions that were inappropriate, that it was tough because I didn't warrant it. And I pride myself on being, you know, a hard worker. So coming into the position that I'm in, and again, I told Sandra this, the second day that I was on this team, I immediately had a seat at the table. I had a voice. Until this day, 2.5 years, almost 3 years later, my supervisors ask me my opinion, and they genuinely want to hear it. They provide opportunities of growth, professional development, communication, open communication, and that's not just with what's going on with work, but life check-ins, especially after last year. And so I say all that to say that it is possible to be in a good situation, in a healthy, non-toxic work environment, being a person of color, being a woman, and, you know, being the only person of color on that team. So we'll segue into the next question. Why do you think traits such as emotional or sensitive or aggressive are always used to describe a woman compared to words such as assertive, ambitious, or straightforward used in terms of describing men? How can that lead to other issues internally with women, both professionally and personally?
That one's a tough one, right? I think that's a pretty heavy question, but I feel that often those negative connotations are used as a way to quiet our voice, right? As Sarah mentioned, you know, the women before us fought for a seat at the table, and then they fought for a voice at the table. And now I feel like we're fighting for an understanding, right? We're speaking, but are you understanding? And so sometimes when you're expressing, right, your frustrations or, you know, your insecurities or maybe issues that are happening, it is hard, you know, to maintain your composure. It is hard to maintain your emotions because you feel like you're not being heard. Yes, you're hearing my voice, but are you really understanding? And so I find that sometimes, you know, we can become insecure, right? When somebody says, oh, you're too emotional, or they can be dismissive of your feelings or the issues that you're bringing forth. And so I think that those connotations are just a way of quieting our voice. But I think that it's important to be persistent, you know, to still speak your voice, regardless if it's shaking, regardless if it comes with tears, regardless of how it comes. I think that it's very important to still say what needs to be said.
I don't know if there are any Hamilton fans on this call today, but I really love the Hamilton line when Aaron Burr is telling Hamilton to talk less and smile more, because of course it's ridiculous, right? And I know I've heard it. I'm sure other people on this call have heard it as well. But I really liked kind of flipping it where you could see it being said to a man and it just kind of reinforced how absolutely ridiculous it is. And so I totally agree with what Mari was just saying, that it's an easy and yet polite way to quiet or silence a voice that you don't want to hear from. And so I get called aggressive all the time. I'm asked to stop being so intimidating. Was literally feedback I got in my graduate program that I was intimidating to the faculty. And I thought, well, if I can intimidate tenured faculty as a 23-year-old master's student, I'm probably going to be pretty successful in my career. So I would just, encourage you to take it just as seriously as our friend Alexander Hamilton did, and just keep on living your life and let Aaron Burr go his own way.
And I think too, what helps is that support system that you have, that I can be very, very emotional and very sensitive at work. And some people may think that negatively, but again, it's just how I get to know people from all different perspectives. But some of these issues that it leads to, and some of the things that I still deal with is, the idea of self-confidence, right? Your self-worth. Like, is the work that I'm doing every day, meaningful, or, are these negative comments that I'm hearing or these positive things, like, you need you need people in your corner to back you up. So whether that is a supportive supervisor, my supervisor, who is a white man, very supportive, pushes me professionally to be engaged in our professional development, professional associations, to get involved outside of our circle of just food service. I've got family and other coworkers and colleagues to lift me up, and just to be encouraging, to say, yes, the work that you're doing matters. People see you, whether you're recognized for it or not. The work that you do behind the curtains and the work that you do for everybody else is important. It's valid. It's valued. And so for people going through that, finding that support system, and then too, just the whole idea of self-care. And I know self-care is talked about constantly, right? Through the trainings that we put on with Staff Senate and through human resources, but that's important as well, to take time, whether that's to talk to somebody professionally, to work through some of these personal and also professional situations and scenarios we have come across. How do I navigate this? Finding that mentor, or being that mentor, as Mari said, to yourself of, hey, you have worked here at Texas Tech for 30 years and I've been here for 10. Surely you've navigated this situation before. Can we meet for a cup of coffee, and can we just have a chat about, these different things that you have come across? So those are just some of the things that personally I've continued to work through, but also realize now in these, at least last year, the importance of having a really strong support system around you to lift you up, both personally and professionally.
You guys are fantastic, and I really liked hearing those answers. I was kind of thinking whenever the question was asked too, I was like, oh, that is a hard question. And I remember thinking back, sorry, Sarah, did I skip? Okay. I remember thinking back to a lot of situations I've had in college and in my young professional world, as I have navigated hard situations and hard conversations. And I would tell myself, don't be the angry Black lady. Do not be the angry Black lady. But sometimes I'm actually the angry Black lady. Sometimes I'm mad. And I don't want my race or my gender or anything to have to confine me into a box where I have to control the things that I think and the things that I believe and things that my attempts to seek justice over not wanting to be heard or dismissed or anything like that. So lots of situations I can think of throughout my very short 5-year-long professional career where I have come home at night and been so defeated and I didn't know what to do because we have these barriers around us. And so in the last year, especially, it's funny, in 2020, a lot of people sat at home and we were kind of confined to ourselves. But I took a lot of that time to reevaluate how I've done the last couple of years as an adult. And I thought that I had spent too much time being this perfect person since I had come from low and then started to get to a good point. And I wanted to keep being at that good point and didn't want to step on anyone's toes. But now, let's get comfortable being uncomfortable, guys. We have to have these hard situations and conversations, and I'm ready to have them. And so I really appreciate you guys sharing that. Let's see what questions we have next. We're running low on time, so we're going to be moving and grooving here for the last couple ones. So ladies, we know all of you guys have experienced moments where you kick some glass, ceilings that is, but we don't often talk about how sometimes we can get cut by that stray glass. Have you experienced something similar to this? And then how did you overcome a situation like that?
Okay, I'll jump in first here. All right, so I think my head at this point as a senior director and a PhD is like bumping up at the top of the glass ceiling as I look up to sort of senior management. From the perspective of middle management at Texas Tech, the ratio of men to women in senior leadership, guys, is still scary. It's unequal, if you will. And I think that I'm cut by the stray glass, if you will, every time I look at pay differences between men and women. The pay inequality for men and women with the same qualifications, the same education, the same skills, knowledges, and abilities, it exists here at Texas Tech, even more so, much more so for women of color. So what we're talking about here is gender pay inequality. It exists for me personally, and it's my example for this.
I will add that in my role, I work with a lot with our general counsel's office, and they have several female attorneys on staff, but the leadership in the office is all male. And so when we attend meetings together, we're talking about policy and procedure when it comes to Title IX, gender equity, some of those things. It's the same thing we've been talking about all conversation. Oftentimes people will look to our male general counsel staff to give the right answer, give the correct answer. And I've been really fortunate that, again, those men choose to be good allies, and they'll say, whoa, hey, I'm just here for the legal opinion. If you need the policy, that's going to be Kim. But that still exists, that you have to prove yourself as the expert first, even when that's why you're in the room to begin with.
Yeah, I'll just add on that. It breaks my heart to see, you know, the literature talks about women almost feel like they have to be 100% or more of all of the knowledge, education, skills, and abilities before they jump in for that next opportunity. But men, as long as they've got about half of it or 60%, sure, I'm up for that. I'm up for that next raise, the promotion. And it always flabbergasts me, you know, as a hiring manager here at Texas Tech, for 12 years, I've been hiring females, and only once, and this is several, I mean, a lot, only once has a female ever asked me for more money, tried to negotiate the pay. Every time I want to make an offer, I secretly want them to come back and ask for more, and let's negotiate it. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation. So if anybody wants some tips on that at the end, you know, you let me know.
We'll hit you up, Dr. Schwintz.
All right, so let's move on to, looks like our wrapping up kind of question. So what barriers have you faced as a woman to becoming successful in higher education? And before you guys start, I kind of wanted to share a story with you. So I am working on my master's, set to graduate in December, hopefully. That's the goal anyway. I don't know how you full-timers did it with families and working full-time and going to school. Challenge accepted, I guess. But I had a project where I had to reach out to I specifically wanted to reach out to a professional in higher ed that was a female. And so we had to interview them and, you know, kind of discuss like what higher ed, their experiences in higher education were. And it had to be in the 80s, 70s, 80s, you know, further back. And I struggled. And I remember thinking, like, as I was researching and looking at our lists of faculty and, you know, just who I've worked with and who are in and around our departments. And one of my classmates chose Dr. Alice Young, who's amazing. And I just remember feeling like we, you know, just like Dr. Schwintz said, we are moving in a forward motion with including more females in those leadership positions, but at such a slow pace. And I did end up finding someone, but I just remember like that feeling of wanting to be a part of, because of that experience and not seeing, you know, having limited choices in interviewees, wanting to be a part of that leadership, you know, kind of group at some point in my higher ed career. So I will now pose that to you all.
So for me, for the longest time, it was the education piece. Like I started as a student in 2009, worked my way up to a student manager, and I've been working part-time since 2014. And then this was an entry-level position at the time, so I jumped right in. But really until I gained more work experience and until I earned my bachelor's degree, for me, that was, and Sarah, this kind of goes back to your women need 100% of everything and not the 60%, because I always felt like I have to have at least on a bachelor's level. Okay, I needed this degree, and I enjoy chemistry, and so I was like, I'm gonna finish. Like my goal is to finish. All I need is just a degree, because it's just a piece of paper at this point. Because my passion is to work within higher ed, maybe not on an academic side of things, but kind of on the more student affairs side and the auxiliary services where I am. And so until I earned my degree in August, that's really when I was like, hey, I'm worth something now. I have all of this experience, work experience, as I was earning my degree, but the fact that this degree just adds 4 years on top, it's not just experience and some education. It's 4 years of education and then all this work experience I have. I was like, wow, my horizons have opened up. And so that's what led to the opportunities like where I could become promoted. But I am toying with this idea, and again, also being a woman too, but just the idea of as you progress in life, we're trying to start a family. And so I'm like, do I want to go for my master's and start a family and have a little child and navigate all of these things on top of everything that I'm doing? And again, kudos to every single woman, and kudos to you, Crystal, because you did it. Like there are so many women out there. Sandra, you did it. Like I know I've had conversations with you about going to get my master's, and Taylor Love and a whole bunch of other people. And I just hear stories about everybody crying, but I know that it's worth it. And so that's one of the things that I'm working through is, when am I going to take that next step? And I know that there's a lot of women here on this call that are taking that step. So keep pushing through. You're doing great. I see you, and I may be you one day.
I also agree with Dr. Schwintz. I think the biggest barrier is always feeling like you have to be more. You have to be more educated. You have to be more experienced. You have to have more skills all the time. And so it's almost like you're going uphill all the time. And it's like, when am I finally going to get there? When am I finally going to get to the top to where I can finally say, okay, I did it. I deserve this. I'm finally getting the pay that I deserve. I'm finally getting the title that I deserve for all of the hard work that I've done. And I think that that's been the hardest barrier. But I think the other thing is, when you start off in a supervisor or management or leadership position, I feel that people try to tell you how to lead because they don't believe in your abilities, or they don't believe that you can do it. And so sometimes it's challenging that of, no, I think I know what I'm doing. I can do this, right? Having confidence in yourself. But that's one of the barriers that I found was hard for me, is that people were kind of trying to make me into the leader or the supervisor or the manager they wanted me to be, not what I needed to be. And so it was hard because you, of course, you have to break through that and say, make your own decisions and push forward and do it the way that you want to. So I find that sometimes is a challenge, is, people are still never think, even though you do have the skills, even though you do have the education, they still think that you're lacking something, even if you're doing everything correctly.
Okay, here's an infuriating story, and it's not about Texas Tech. So a recruiter contacted me for a Title IX position at another institution. I'm not currently looking, let's just put that out there. But a recruiter contacted me about a Title IX job at a smaller school, half as many students, no Division I sports. I think they maybe have 1,000 students that live on campus. And so when they were talking to me about this role that they reached out to me for, the recruiter said something like, well, if you're interested in this opportunity, we really just would need to prove to the search committee that you could do this job, right? Like, how could you prove to them that you could do it? And I just started laughing, which I wouldn't normally recommend on a call if you are actually applying for jobs. But I said, what do you mean need to prove it? Like, I'm doing the job now. Right? Like, this is not a grow into the next position, to Sarah's and others' points, right? Like, this is the job I'm doing now. And I've been doing it at a Division I school with 40,000 students, and not perfectly, right? There's always room for improvement, but I think I do pretty okay. And so even for a job that I currently hold, that I've held for several years, the expectation is still, could you make this other group of people believe that you're capable of doing the work? And that's the point where really I just kind of laughed and hung up on them and told them they were really wasting their time. But I think it really shows exactly this point, that not only do we expect women to be prepared, we expect them to be over-prepared and to still have to defend their record, even if we're asking you to do something that you've already been showing that you could do, which I think is really sad. And I think we see more opportunities for women in some areas than others, right? There are more women in leadership in gender equity roles, or our vice president for diversity and inclusion is a woman of color, right? And those things are great, but I'd love to see more CFOs. We do have a female CFO, right? We do have a female chief of staff, but we always could use more deans of hard sciences that are female, or full professors that are female in other departments. So I think some of those opportunities exist, but they're still in some really gendered spaces. And so really just expanding that to whatever it is that our areas and passions are, we need to make sure all of higher education is open to women.
Yeah, I just want to end that conversation about just talk about motherhood and bearing children, right? And you talk about barriers in the workplace. I always thought I had to wait or plan how to have children, right? So I didn't get off balance with my partner's career, disrupt that work-life balance. You know, how I just think a lot of that's just hogwash, right? You have a baby when you want to, you adopt a baby when you want to, and then you make decisions as you need to throughout pregnancy or throughout the adoption process. I do want to take this space to talk about, I don't know that a lot of women understand their FMLA rights and what intermittent leave is. So my second living child was born almost 4 years ago. I had 12 weeks off of paid FMLA. Isn't that great? You know, good for me. Everyone told me, just take 3 months off with your baby, enjoy her. But what I really wanted was to come back at 6 weeks part-time and use intermittent FMLA for another 12 weeks. I didn't know that that was really a right, you know, for me working here at Texas Tech. And so I should have listened to my gut and really what I needed, because my professional identity is important to me just as much as it as being a mom, right? I had a coworker tell me, you have a lot of talents and abilities, Sarah. Motherhood's just one of them, right? You have a lot of other talents. Also, what was important to me too was extended breastfeeding. So I braved taking that HR approval form to my male supervisor, who's great, by the way, to ask for those extra months to use the mother-friendly room. A lot of people don't realize that you can do that. That was important to me. So I want to tell anyone on here that's a staff member trying to plan for adoption or having a baby visit with HR, because you have a lot more rights, if you will, when entering motherhood or re-entering motherhood.
That is excellent advice, Dr. Schwintz. I don't think that, also I have a coworker that needed some kind of extra HR advice. So I'm glad that you did offer that. Just in wrapping up, we just have a couple of minutes left. Really like a 1 minute and 30 seconds. But in wrapping up, and please feel free to leave the meeting if you need to, I just wanted to kind of close out and say, how would you advise or encourage someone that wants to pursue furthering their career in general or within higher ed? Just for anyone that's listening right now, what would be that one piece of advice that you or encouragement that you would give them?
I think for me, it would just be try. You know, don't feel like you're not qualified. Don't feel like you don't have the education. If there's a position, you know, go out there and apply for it. The worst thing that they can say is no. And also, you know, I think taking responsibility for your own professional development. You know, sometimes your supervisors, your departments, your organization won't always provide that for you. And so, you know, identifying, you know, things that you need to improve and taking responsibility for your own professional development, I think is really important. That way you can boost your resume, right? You can boost your resume and you can apply for those positions. So I just say try, you know, don't give up, believe in yourself is pretty much the advice that I would give.
I would say don't be afraid to take up space in the world. Sarah really hit on this, that there's no perfect time to have a child or to move for a new career, to put your hat in the ring for a dream job, right? There is never going to be a good time. no one else is ever going to make it easy for you. And so I think understanding you, what's important to you, your own tolerance for risk and chaos sometimes, those should really be the only factors in the discussion. And then expect everyone else to adapt the way they need to. You are entitled to the space, you're entitled to opportunities, and other people that don't like it are not your concern.
I think I just want to end with continue this space of networking with one another. Find a mentor, spend time with a mentor, go out to lunch every month with a mentor. Don't be afraid to ask someone if you like somebody on this call, follow up with them, and let's connect with each other too online. LinkedIn is a great source. So connect with other women on LinkedIn. So that would be my advice.
All wonderful advice. And my closing advice would be, if you're looking for ways to get involved too, not only to find networking within other women and outside of that, Joint Staff Senate. We are accepting nominations through April 5th. It is a wonderful opportunity. You've gotten to experience the wonderful programming that the Diversity Committee has put on, but there are numerous other ways you can get involved with our committees, whether you're a PR and communications person, you're somebody that wants to tackle issues and make change on campus, or maybe you want to, you're a technology guru and you want to help us build our website. But it is a wonderful way. And I will say this, the pandemic has come with challenges in that we have these virtual spaces. So I'm very sad that I'm not able to meet, many of our new senators or even you all in person. But once things open up, again, it is just a wonderful 3 years to really get to know other people outside of your own comfort level, outside of where you are. But we're all here as women to build each other up, to be supportive of each other. So I'm going to echo what Sarah said, that if anybody here needs to reach out, call, have coffee, lunch, what have you, we are here for each other. And I only think it makes Texas Tech stronger when we just build each other up and allow everybody to have their voice heard and problem solve. So thanks y'all for putting this on.
Thank you guys all for joining us today. This was a really great discussion. And I really appreciate you guys all. For all of our attendees, whether you came or RSVP'd or whatever that was, we'll have the recording up here in a couple of days. And if you have any questions or would like to reach out further to the panelists, we will have their information ready to provide you guys all. I will say my last thing that I'll say is when I first applied for jobs after I got out of college, my first interview, I went all the way to meeting the final hiring manager, and she said, this job has a strict 3 years or more experience hiring policy. How are you coming from college and sitting in front of my desk? And I told her that I was going to keep going until someone told me no. And that's what I did. And so I think that's a piece of advice I've gone through all of life, is that I'm just going to keep going until someone told me I couldn't do it and then try again from there. So moving on from that, we're so thankful all of you guys were able to join us today. Thank you, panelists, for giving up your time and your lunch hour. And we'll see you guys next time. Thank you.